An object that should not exist is waiting in the dust of history. This is the core of our search today, a journey through 35 archaeological finds that do not fit the timeline. By the end, you will see human history not as a straight line, but as a tapestry full of unexpected knots and puzzling threads. We will examine a 2,000-year-old clay jar that might be a battery, and stone spheres so perfect they seem machined. How did a complex astronomical computer sink into obscurity for over a millennium? And what monumental purpose did thousands of giant stone jars truly serve? Each discovery forces us to reconsider the ingenuity and mystery of those who came before. Are we prepared to let go of the stories we think we know? A simple clay jar, no larger than a hand, sits quietly in a museum case. It is unassuming, a reddish vessel sealed with asphalt. Yet inside, its secret lay hidden for centuries. Within that jar, archaeologists found a carefully Within that, an iron rod, discovered in the 1930s near Baghdad, in a region once part of the ancient Parthian Empire. This object is roughly 2,000 years old. On its own, each piece is mundane. Together, they form a puzzle that has sparked decades of debate. When a modern researcher filled a replica with a common acidic substance like vinegar or grape juice, something remarkable happened. A measurable voltage was produced, a faint but undeniable electric current. This is why it earned the name the Baghdad Battery. The immediate question is as obvious as it is thrilling. What was its purpose? Mainstream interpretations suggest it could have been a storage container for sacred texts, with the iron and copper acting as protective rods. But the design is suspiciously specific for such a simple task. Other thinkers have proposed a more tantalizing use. In the same era, artisans were masters of fine metalwork, including a technique where a thin layer of gold is applied to another metal surface. Modern electroplating uses a mild electric current to achieve this very effect. Could this jar, connected in series with others, have provided that current? It is a compelling thought experiment. A craftsperson might have dipped a silver object into a gold solution, connected it to this simple cell, and watched as a shimmering layer deposited itself. The evidence is circumstantial, but the possibility lingers like a whisper from the past. This artifact does not come with an instruction manual. No wires were found, no diagrams explaining its use. It exists in that gray area between accidental design and intentional invention. That is precisely what makes it the perfect starting point for our journey. It challenges a linear view of progress. It asks us to consider that flashes of insight, of understanding fundamental principles, may have occurred, been applied in a limited way, and then faded from common knowledge, waiting to be rediscovered millennia later. The Baghdad Battery is not a smoking gun for ancient technology, but it is a persistent spark of mystery, a quiet suggestion that our ancestors' ingenuity might have taken paths we are only beginning to trace. From that faint spark of possibility in a clay jar, we travel to a discovery that illuminates a lost constellation of knowledge. It began not in a museum, but in the silent darkness of the Aegean Sea. In the year 1900, sponge divers off the coast of a small Greek island named Antikythera stumbled upon a shipwreck. Among the statues and ceramics, they recovered a lump of corroded bronze and wood, so encrusted and fragile it seemed like little more than sea-rotted debris. For decades, it sat in the National Archaeological Museum in Athens, a curious footnote. Then, researchers began to look closer. X-rays and later, advanced three-dimensional scanning peeled back the layers of time and corrosion. What they revealed was nothing short of breathtaking. Inside that unassuming lump was a clockwork universe, delicate, interlocking bronze gears, some with teeth cut with microscopic precision, were arranged in a complex system of dials and pointers. This was the Antikythera mechanism, and it was a machine for reading the sky. Built around 100 years before the Common Era, this device was an analog computer of staggering ambition. By turning a hand crank on the side, an operator could calculate the positions of the sun and moon, predict lunar and solar eclipses, and track the cycles of known planets. It even included a dial to count down to the next Olympic Games, tying celestial motion to human ritual. The engineering is what truly staggers the modern mind. It utilized differential gearing, a technique so advanced it was not thought to have been invented until the 16th century in Europe. Here was a technology that leaped over a millennium and a half of presumed progress. This was not a tool for farming or simple timekeeping. It was a philosophical instrument, a model of the cosmos made of bronze and intellect. It speaks of a Hellenistic world where astronomy, mathematics, and precision craftsmanship converged in ways we are only beginning to appreciate. The mechanism implies a lost lineage of thought, a school of engineering and cosmic understanding that flourished and then vanished, its secrets sinking literally to the bottom of the sea. Its very existence rewrites a chapter in the history of science. It tells us that peak of ancient ingenuity was not a gradual slope, but a mountain we once climbed, only to later forget the path entirely. The Antikythera mechanism is not an anomaly to be dismissed. It is a recovered piece of a much larger, much more sophisticated puzzle, a silent testament to a golden age of discovery that darkness eventually swallowed. The silent gears of the Antikythera mechanism model a cosmos understood with stunning clarity, yet its discovery emerged from the random chance of a shipwreck. This raises a haunting question: how many other expressions of such advanced thought have been found, only to be misinterpreted because we could not see past our own assumptions? One such object rests not in a Greek museum, but in a case in Cairo, and it appears at first glance to be a simple child's plaything. Carved from sycamore wood, this small artifact was discovered in 1898 during an excavation of a tomb in Saqqara, Egypt. It is dated to around 200 years before the Common Era. It is called the Saqqara bird. On the surface, it is a stylized bird figure, sleek and smooth. But look closer and the familiar begins to twist into the unfamiliar. Unlike typical bird carvings from the period, this object has no legs. More strikingly, its tail is not horizontal like a bird's, but vertical and flat, like the rudder or tail fin of a modern airplane. The wings are carefully shaped, not for flapping, but with a distinct airfoil cross-section, a design that generates lift. These are not the features of a ritual object or a toy meant to sit on a shelf. They are functional design choices. When modern aerodynamics experts have created and tested scale models of the Saqqara bird, they have found something remarkable. When launched with a little thrust, the model exhibits stable gliding properties. It does not tumble or stall, it sails. This simple piece of wood, over 2,000 years old, possesses the basic aerodynamic principles of a glider. The immediate skepticism is understandable. Could it be a ceremonial object, perhaps a blade for a ritual fan? Could it simply be a weather vane missing its mounting? Yet the evidence of its form argues against these simpler explanations. A weather vane needs to pivot, and this artifact shows no signs of such an attachment. A child's toy bird would typically have legs. The vertical tail fin serves no decorative purpose in avian iconography, but it is absolutely critical for stabilizing an aircraft in flight. So what are we looking at? It is highly unlikely the ancient Egyptians were building full-sized airplanes, but the idea that a keen observer, perhaps a craftsman watching birds soar on thermal currents, might have codified those principles into a testable model is not so far-fetched. This could represent a moment of empirical inquiry, a physical hypothesis carved in wood. It is a prototype not of a machine that was ever built, but of an idea that was understood. The Saqqara bird does not prove ancient flight. Instead, it suggests a line of thought, an exploration of form and function that resonates eerily with our own technological journey. It is a whisper of aerodynamic intuition, a silent, wooden question mark that soars across the centuries, challenging us to wonder just how deeply the ancients studied the world and how many of their insights we have yet to recognize. Sometimes a mystery is not about what we find, but about the story we choose to see in it. This brings us to a small, perplexing object that has become a legend in its own right, the Coso artifact. In the spring of 1961, three friends who were avid mineral collectors were searching the dry landscape of California's Coso Mountains. They were looking for geodes, those rough stone shells that can hide beautiful crystal interiors. When they found one particular specimen, they took a rock hammer to it, expecting the familiar glitter of quartz. Instead, the broken halves revealed something entirely man-made. At the center of the hardened clay and fossilized shells was a mechanical device. It consisted of a porcelain cylinder, a rusted metal shaft, and what looked like a copper spring or washer. To anyone with even a passing knowledge of 20th century machinery, it was unmistakable. It looked exactly like a spark plug from an early automobile. The immediate and obvious conclusion would be that this was a modern item that had somehow become lodged in a rock, but the circumstances made that seem difficult. The geode was found in a remote area, and the hard concretion layer around the object appeared ancient. Initial, informal examinations suggested the concretion could have taken hundreds of thousands of years to form. That single suggestion was the spark that ignited a firestorm of speculation. If the encasing material was truly that old, then the spark plug inside was an impossibility, a glaring anachronism that would rewrite history. For a time, the Coso artifact became the ultimate out-of-place artifact, a symbol of lost advanced technology or even visitation from other worlds. It was a story too compelling to ignore. The narrative of a 20th century component sealed inside a prehistoric stone was a perfect paradox. However, the true story of the Coso artifact is a masterclass in the importance of skepticism and thorough investigation. As researchers looked more closely, the mystery began to unravel. Experts in geology noted that concretions, which are masses of mineral matter that can form around a foreign object, can develop surprisingly quickly under the right conditions, not over millennia but over decades. The object itself was subjected to closer scrutiny. Collectors of antique automotive parts identified it not as a mysterious relic, but as a very specific model. The internal structure, the materials, and the design matched a champion brand spark plug manufactured in the 1920s. The most likely explanation is now widely accepted. A spark plug from a car or piece of mining equipment was discarded or lost in those mountains in the early 20th century. Over the following 40 or so years, mineral-rich water percolated around it, depositing layers of hardpan clay and attracting shells which also fossilized. It formed a convincing, stony shell in a relatively short geological time frame. The rockhounds in 1961 simply found it before the concretion process was complete enough to completely obscure its identity. So why does this artifact, with a fairly clear modern explanation, still hold such a powerful place in discussions like this one? Because its story perfectly captures the two essential forces at play in our search for the past. The first is our profound desire to find evidence that shatters our timeline, that hints at something greater and more mysterious. The second, and just as crucial, is the disciplined process of inquiry that tests those desires against evidence. The Coso artifact reminds us that not every puzzle piece belongs to a different puzzle. Sometimes it is a piece from our own box that we simply did not recognize because of the context. Yet its enduring fame underscores a vital truth. The pursuit of these anomalies, even those that are later explained, sharpens our questions and refines our methods. It teaches us to look closer, to question first assumptions, and to appreciate that the real wonder often lies not in a fantastical answer, but in the intricate, ordinary processes of our world that can create such extraordinary illusions. The line between a modern tool and an ancient relic can be as thin as the crust of stone that forms around it. This truth is perfectly embodied by another famous object, one discovered not in a grand tomb or a temple, but by the side of a quiet creek in Texas. In 1936, a couple walking along Red Creek near the town of London, Texas, noticed an unusual piece of rock with a bit of wood protruding from it. When they broke the stone open, they found a hammer inside. This was no ordinary hammer left behind by a farmer. The wooden handle was partially transformed to stone, a process known as petrification, and the iron head was encased in a solid concretion of Cretaceous rock, a geological formation typically dated to over 100 million years old. The hammer itself presented another puzzle. Analysis of the iron head revealed a remarkably pure composition, with a lack of the slag and impurities common in historic ironworking. It seemed too well made. This combination of factors, a seemingly modern tool locked inside ancient stone, created an immediate and profound contradiction. For some, particularly those who interpret history through a different lens, the London hammer became powerful evidence. It was cited as potential proof that humans walked the Earth far earlier than mainstream science suggests, or as evidence that the geological dating of the rock layers themselves might be flawed. The artifact was a physical challenge, a wrench thrown directly into the gears of conventional timelines. The scientific explanation, however, focuses on the fascinating and deceptive power of natural processes. Geologists point to a phenomenon known as rapid concretion formation. The hammer, they propose, was a relatively recent tool, perhaps from the 19th century, that was lost or discarded near the creek bed. Over time, mineral-rich water percolated around it. Dissolved elements like lime and silica precipitated out, cementing sediment and small shells around the object in a hard, stone-like shell. This concretion process can happen surprisingly quickly, within decades or centuries, not millions of years. The petrified wood of the handle is also consistent with this explanation. In the right mineral-rich environment, organic material can be replaced by stone in a relatively short geological time frame, especially in porous wood that readily absorbs mineral-laden water. So we are left with two compelling narratives. One sees an impossible object, a definitive out-of-place artifact that demands a rewrite of history. The other sees a perfectly ordinary object that has been masterfully disguised by the patient, artistic hand of nature. The London hammer does not provide easy answers. Instead, it serves as a critical lesson in context. It asks us to consider not just the object itself, but the entire story of the stone that holds it. It reminds us that the Earth has its own methods of preservation and deception, creating puzzles that test both our imagination and our scientific rigor. This humble tool from Texas forces a simple but profound question. When we find something that does not fit, are we looking at a flaw in history, or are we witnessing the incredible skill of the natural world in creating perfect, believable illusions? A hammer sealed in stone tests our understanding of natural processes, but some stories challenge the very nature of evidence itself. High in the remote mountains bordering China and Tibet, a narrative was born that would become a legend in the world of archaeological anomalies. The story begins in 1938, when a Chinese archaeologist named Kai Pu-Te is said to have discovered a series of strange burials in a mountain cave. The skeletons were reportedly of unusual small stature. More intriguing were the artifacts found with them, hundreds of stone discs, each with a hole in the center and a fine groove spiraling from the center to the rim, resembling ancient phonograph records. For decades, these so-called Dropa stones sat in storage, their strange appearance unexplained. Then, in the 1960s, the tale took an extraordinary turn. A researcher claimed to have analyzed the discs and found they were made of a cobalt-rich granite, and more astonishingly, that the spiral grooves were not decorative, but actually a continuous line of microscopic hieroglyphic writing. When this writing was supposedly deciphered, it told a heartbreaking story. It described the crash landing of a spacecraft from a distant star, the stranded survivors calling themselves the Dropa, and their doomed attempts to coexist with the local mountain tribes. It was a perfect, compelling science fiction narrative, a first-person account etched in stone of ancient contact. The problem, and it is a profound one, is that none of the core elements of this story hold up to scrutiny. No credible photographs of the discs or the unusual skeletons have ever been published. The principal figures, like Kai Pute, are unverified and untraceable in academic records. The discs themselves have never been made available for independent scientific examination by any major museum or research institution. Every attempt to track down the primary evidence leads to a dead end, a reference to another unverifiable report, or a reprinted version of the same original, sensational article. So what are we left with? The Dropa stones serve a different but equally important purpose in our exploration. They stand as a powerful cautionary tale about the anatomy of a modern myth. They show how a kernel of a find, perhaps some actual carved stone discs of unknown purpose, can be woven together with imaginative speculation, repeated through magazines and books, and stripped of all verifiable sources until it becomes accepted as a mystery in its own right. It highlights the human desire for connection, for stories that place us within a grander cosmic drama. We want to believe that such a direct, physical record of an extraterrestrial presence could exist. That longing can sometimes outpace our critical judgment. This does not diminish the value of questioning history, but it underscores the necessity of anchoring that questioning in evidence that can be touched, tested, and debated. The Dropa narrative, in the end, is not an archaeological find that does not fit the timeline. It is a cultural artifact of the 20th century, a story about our own hopes and our timeless fascination with the stars, mistakenly presented as a relic of the ancient past. It teaches us that sometimes the greatest mystery is not in the ground, but in the echo chamber of our own imaginations. The line between a documented marvel and an unverified legend is often drawn on parchment. In the year 1513, an Ottoman admiral and cartographer named Piri Reis sat down to compile a world map. He drew it on gazelle skin, a beautiful and durable medium, and he filled its margins with notes explaining his sources. He wrote that he had consulted 20 older maps, including some dating back to the time of Alexander the Great, and even charts drawn by Christopher Columbus himself. This document, known today as the Piri Reis map, is a stunning work of art and scholarship for its time, accurately depicting the coast of Brazil and portions of the Caribbean. But a small section at its bottom edge has ignited a firestorm of debate that continues to this day. There, below the Atlantic Ocean and the tip of South America, lies a rough, jagged coastline. For some researchers, this landmass bears a startling resemblance to the coastline of Antarctica, specifically the Queen Maud Land region, as it would appear if its massive ice sheet were removed. The implication is as profound as it is controversial. It would suggest that someone, long before Admiral Reis, had mapped a continent that would not be officially discovered by Europeans for another 300 years, and did so when it was possibly ice-free, a condition mainstream geology says ended millions of years ago. This idea fuels a compelling narrative of a lost, advanced civilization with global seafaring capabilities, their knowledge preserved in fragments and inherited by later map makers. The scholarly counterpoint, however, focuses intently on the admiral's own notes and the cartographic practices of his era. Piri Reis was a compiler, not an explorer of the southern oceans. His map is a patchwork of many sources, some accurate, some speculative, and some simply misunderstood. Most experts in historical cartography argue that the controversial landmass is far more likely a representation of the speculative Terra Australis, a large southern continent that European geographers had hypothesized for centuries but had not yet found. It could also be a distorted, extended version of the Patagonian coast, pieced together from confused sailor reports. The true enigma of the Piri Reis map, therefore, is not a hidden depiction of Antarctica. Its real mystery lies in the silent, lost library that informed it. What were those 20 ancient source maps that the Admiral referenced? What knowledge from the libraries of Alexandria or Constantinople, since lost to fire and time, did they contain? The map is a ghost image, a palimpsest of vanished scholarship. It whispers not of impossible ancient technologies, but of the vast, tragic fragility of human knowledge. It reminds us that our understanding of the past is built on a foundation of fragments, where a single surviving line on gazelle skin can hint at entire worlds of exploration and thought that have vanished without a trace, leaving us to wonder what other coastlines, real or imagined, have been forever erased from our collective memory. The silent coastlines on ancient maps hint at knowledge lost to time, but what if an entire library of that knowledge survived, yet remains utterly unreadable? In the vaults of Yale University's Voynich Rare Book and Manuscript Library rests an object that is arguably the world's most beautiful mystery. It is a small book about the size of a modern paperback, bound in soft vellum. Its pages are filled from edge to edge with graceful, looping script in an alphabet no one on Earth recognizes. This is the Voynich manuscript. Carbon dating places its creation firmly in the early 15th century, in the heart of Renaissance Europe. But its contents are from no world we know. The text, written left to right with apparent fluency, flows around exquisite illustrations that only deepen the enigma. There are pages upon pages of unknown botanical specimens, plants with bulbous roots and fantastical leaves that correspond to no known species in our herbals. There are astrological diagrams featuring unfamiliar constellations and zodiac-like symbols arranged in complex, concentric circles. Perhaps most haunting are the so-called biological sections, which depict small, nude human figures, mostly female, bathing in or connected by intricate networks of tubes and vessels to strange, green, pool-like structures. The entire book feels like a meticulous scientific or medical treatise from a parallel dimension. For over a century, since it resurfaced in 1912, the world's best cryptographers, linguists, and mathematicians have assaulted its pages. Military codebreakers from both world wars, armed with supercomputers, have tried and failed. They have applied every tool of frequency analysis, looking for the patterns that betray any human language. And they have found patterns, which is the most maddening part. The script obeys linguistic rules. Word lengths follow a natural distribution. Characters have positional preferences, and the text has a structure that feels organic, not random. This is not gibberish. It appears to be a genuine language or a cipher of phenomenal complexity. So what are we looking at? The theories are as varied as the manuscript's strange illustrations. Some believe it to be an elaborate, centuries-old hoax, crafted to fool a wealthy patron. Yet the sheer, consistent effort required to produce over 240 pages of coherent, patterned nonsense seems a monumental waste of medieval effort. Others propose it is written in a natural language that has since been lost, perhaps a constructed tongue or a very obscure dialect encoded in a unique script. The most tantalizing idea is that it is a cipher protecting profound secrets, possibly of an alchemical or herbal nature, meant only for the eyes of an initiated few. The green pools in the biological section, for instance, have been interpreted as everything from symbolic diagrams of spiritual processes to literal recipes for mysterious elixirs. The truth is, we do not know. The Voynich manuscript is a perfect artifact of silence. It is a message that has traveled through time, beautifully preserved, only to find that the key to its meaning was left behind. It stands as a humbling reminder that the past is not always a story waiting to be read. Sometimes it is a locked door, and we are left on the outside, hearing only the faintest echo of the conversation within, a conversation conducted in a language we may never learn to speak. A locked door of language like the Voynich manuscript leaves us yearning to see what its creators saw. But high above the coastal deserts of Peru, an entire civilization left a message so vast it can only be read from the sky. Scratched into the dark, stony surface of the Nazca plains are hundreds of immense geoglyphs, lines and figures that transform the earth itself into a sprawling canvas. From ground level, they are nearly invisible, just shallow grooves in the reddish-brown gravel. But ascend to the height of a nearby hill, or better yet, take flight, and the landscape reveals its secrets. A hummingbird with wings outstretched over 300 feet, a spider with legs perfectly proportioned, a sinuous monkey with a spiraling tail, a whale, a tree, hands, and endless straight lines that run for miles, cutting across the desert with arrow-like precision. These are the Nazca lines, created by a people who flourished from around 500 years before the Common Era to 500 years after. The sheer physical act of their creation is not the deepest mystery. Researchers have demonstrated that with simple tools, careful planning, and coordinated labor, teams could have moved the darker surface stones to reveal the lighter soil beneath, creating these stark contrasts. The real wonder lies in the vision. How did the Nazca, without the aid of flight, conceptualize and execute designs of such scale and precision that their form is only coherent from hundreds of feet in the air? One compelling theory suggests they used a system of scaled-down models and a grid system, transferring the design point by point to the vast desert floor. It was an exercise in monumental geometry and communal purpose, but this technical explanation only leads to a more profound question. Why? What drove this culture to expend such tremendous effort on art meant for a viewpoint they could never physically achieve? For many, the answer points upward to the realm of the divine. In an environment as harsh and dry as the Nazca Desert, water was life itself. The lines and figures may have been ritual pathways walked during ceremonies to invoke the gods of rain and fertility. The animals depicted often have associations with water in Andean cosmology. The spider, for instance, was linked to rain, and the hummingbird to the vital mountain springs. From this perspective, the lines were not meant for human eyes at all, but were offerings laid out on a colossal altar, visible only to the deities in the sky. They were a prayer etched into the very skin of the earth, a permanent plea for survival. Other interpretations see them as astronomical markers, aligning with celestial events important to their calendar and agriculture. Perhaps they served multiple purposes, blending science, religion, and identity. The Nazca lines challenge our perception of ancient art. They were not objects to be held or hung in a temple. They were an environmental intervention, a reshaping of the landscape itself to communicate with cosmic forces. They force us to consider a worldview where the earth and the sky were in constant dialogue, and humanity's role was to inscribe its devotion, its pleas, and its understanding onto the ground in lines so bold that only the heavens could read them in their entirety. This transforms the desert from a barren place into a sacred text, written not in words but in the graceful, enduring language of form and space. Deep in the humid jungles of Costa Rica's Diquis Delta, another kind of geometry emerged, not etched into the earth but carved from its very bones. Workers clearing land for banana plantations in the 1930s began to uncover them, emerging from the soil like the eggs of stone giants. They are the stone spheres of Costa Rica, and their silence is as profound as their perfection. Ranging in size from a small handheld ball to colossal orbs over 2 meters across and weighing many tons, these spheres are crafted from a hard, igneous rock called gabbro. The immediate, overwhelming impression is one of flawless geometry. Many are so precisely spherical that modern measurements find only the slightest of imperfections. This was no accident of nature. Creating such forms from solid stone without metal tools represents a staggering feat of craftsmanship and patient, systematic labor. Archaeologists believe the process likely involved a combination of techniques. First, a large boulder would be roughly shaped by heating it with fire and then rapidly cooling it with water, causing layers to fracture and flake away. Then, the long, meticulous work of pecking and grinding would begin, using stone hammers and abrasives to slowly, incrementally, wear the rock down into its final, smooth form. This required not just strength, but an intuitive, advanced understanding of three-dimensional geometry. The artisans had to maintain a perfect curve in their mind's eye, adjusting their work from every angle to achieve a shape that nature itself rarely produces. But the true mystery of these spheres is not how they were made, but why. Their original placements have been almost entirely lost to history. When plantation workers found them, many were moved, rolled away with heavy machinery to adorn government buildings, corporate headquarters, and private gardens. Others were dynamited by superstition or simple frustration, destroyed in the search for hidden treasure that was never there. This loss of context is an archaeological tragedy, because where the spheres once sat may have been the key to their meaning. The few arrangements that were documented before being disturbed suggest they were placed in alignments, often in groups near the homes of important leaders or in public plazas. Some theories propose they were symbols of power and status. The larger and more perfect the sphere, the greater the authority of its owner. Others look to the heavens, suggesting the arrangements mirrored constellations or marked important solar events, turning a village into a cosmic map. Perhaps they were representations of celestial bodies, or even symbols of perfection and unity for the community. Without their original positions, we are left with the objects alone, these silent, polished sentinels. They stand now as a testament to a culture whose name we do not even know with certainty, a people who invested generations of labor into the pursuit of an ideal form. They valued symmetry and precision so deeply that they poured that vision into the most permanent medium imaginable, the living rock of their homeland. The spheres ask us a simple, haunting question. What vision of the world, what belief about order and beauty was so powerful that it demanded expression in 1,000 stones, each one a perfect echo of the same profound idea? The pursuit of perfect geometry in stone speaks to an ancient desire for order, but what happens when that desire is projected onto the past itself? In the coastal desert region of Ica, Peru, a different kind of stone story emerged, one that captivated the world before unraveling in controversy. Beginning in the 1960s, a local farmer named Basilio Ashuya began to bring curious stones to the attention of collectors and researchers. These were not spheres but river rocks smoothed by time, and upon their dark surfaces were etched intricate, elaborate scenes. The images were nothing short of astonishing. They depicted humans interacting with creatures unmistakably resembling dinosaurs, including triceratops and stegosaurs. Other stones showed figures performing what looked like complex surgical procedures, using advanced medical tools. There were maps of unknown continents, astronomers peering through telescopes, and even what seemed to be heart transplant operations. The narrative these stones suggested was explosive. They hinted at a lost civilization with knowledge of paleontology, modern medicine, and global geography, a culture that somehow coexisted with long-extinct giants and possessed technology rivaling our own. For those seeking to rewrite human history, the Ica stones were a treasure trove of apparent evidence. The story, however, contained a critical flaw. The stones never appeared in any documented archaeological dig. They were always sold by individuals, never found in situ by professional teams. The farmer at the center of the story, Basilio Ashuya, eventually confessed. He explained that he had engraved the stones himself using simple tools like a dental drill. His inspiration, he said, came from a mix of sources, comic books, textbooks, and his own imagination. He would then age the stones by baking them in donkey dung to give them a patina of antiquity. The entire collection, once heralded as a revolutionary discovery, was revealed to be an elaborate fabrication. Yet the Ica stones remain profoundly important, not as ancient artifacts, but as a powerful cultural lesson. They represent a case study in how the intense desire for a revolutionary past can temporarily overwhelm critical judgment. They highlight the crucial distinction between a genuine, unexplained artifact and a story crafted to fit a predetermined narrative. The stones also ask us to consider the role of the artisan in this drama. Ashuya was not simply a forger, he was, in his own way, a storyteller. He tapped into the deep, universal questions about human origins and lost knowledge, and he gave them a physical form that people were eager to believe in. His creations fulfilled a market, both financial and intellectual, for evidence that the standard timeline was wrong. In the end, the Ica stones teach a vital principle for any explorer of history's mysteries. Extraordinary claims do not just require extraordinary evidence, they require that evidence to be verifiable, reproducible, and open to scrutiny from all sides. A true anomaly invites investigation, it does not hide from it. This episode reminds us that the most compelling mysteries are those that withstand the light of inquiry, not those that flourish only in its absence. A single silver coin, smaller than a fingernail, can hold the weight of an entire historical possibility. In 1957, at a well-documented Native American settlement site in Maine known as the Goddard Site, archaeologists uncovered a trove of artifacts. They found stone tools, pottery fragments, and other objects that spoke of a community living and trading there for centuries. Among these thousands of indigenous items was one tiny, glaring exception. It was a worn silver coin, later identified through expert analysis as a Norwegian penny, a Norse coin minted during the reign of King Olaf Kyrre between 1067 and 1093 of the Common Era. This is the Maine penny. Its discovery sent a shockwave through the study of pre-Columbian contact. Here was a physical object, a piece of stamped Norse currency, found hundreds of miles south of the only confirmed Viking settlement in the Americas, El Ants Aux Meadows in Newfoundland. That settlement dates to around the year 1000, a full lifetime before this coin was even minted. So how did a coin from late 11th century Norway end up buried in the soil of coastal New England? The immediate, romantic conclusion is that it is direct evidence of Viking explorers sailing far down the Atlantic coast, perhaps establishing fleeting contact with the native peoples of the region long before Columbus. It is a thrilling narrative, suggesting the Norse exploration of the New World was far more extensive than our records show. Yet the context of the find introduces a necessary and fascinating complexity. The Maine penny was utterly alone. No other Norse artifacts, no tools, no ship rivets, no signs of a settlement were found at the Goddard site or anywhere nearby. It was a solitary silver stranger in a sea of local material culture. This isolation forces archaeologists to consider other, more nuanced pathways. The most widely accepted theory involves the vast, interconnected trade networks that existed among indigenous peoples of North America. These networks stretched for thousands of miles, moving goods like copper from the Great Lakes, shells from the Gulf of Mexico, and obsidian from the far west. It is entirely plausible that this Norse coin, perhaps originally left at El Ants Ox Meadows or traded in the Arctic, began a long, slow journey south. Passed from hand to hand over generations, moving through countless exchanges, its value transformed from currency to a curious trinket, a piece of exotic raw material, or a ceremonial object. It could have traveled for a century or more before finally coming to rest in Maine. There is also the possibility, though considered less likely given the site's integrity, that it was a much later loss dropped by a colonial-era collector. But its discovery amid a professionally excavated pre-Columbian layer makes this explanation difficult to support. The Maine penny, therefore, is not a definitive marker of a Viking longhouse on the coast of Maine. Instead, it is something perhaps more interesting, a testament to the incredible reach of ancient exchange. It is a whisper of connection, a single data point that proves material objects could travel extraordinary distances across cultural boundaries. It keeps the door to broader Norse exploration tantalizingly ajar, not by slamming it open with overwhelming proof, but by leaving it cracked, allowing a sliver of light and a persistent draft of curiosity to forever filter through. This small coin challenges us to think not in terms of dramatic landings, but of slow, patient currents of contact, where a piece of silver could become a story in itself, traded until its origins were forgotten, but its mystery was only just beginning. A solitary coin is a whisper of contact, but a 200-pound stone is a shout. In the autumn of 1898, a Swedish immigrant farmer named Olof Oman was clearing tree stumps from his field near Kensington, Minnesota, when his plow struck something solid. What he unearthed was a large, flat slab of greywacke, a hard, gray stone. As he turned it over, he was stunned to find its face covered in strange, carved characters. They were runes, the ancient alphabet of the Norse. The inscription, when translated, told an astonishing story. It spoke of a group of 8 Goths or Swedes and 22 Norwegians on an exploration journey from Vinland, the Viking name for part of North America. The text described a tragic outcome, with 10 men left by the sea to look after their ships and the rest camped inland, only to return one evening to find their companions slain. Most startling of all, it was dated the year 1362. This was the Kensington runestone, and if genuine, it promised to rewrite the history books entirely, placing Scandinavian explorers deep in the heart of North America over 130 years before Columbus sailed. The stone ignited a firestorm of academic and public debate that has never fully cooled. From the moment it was presented to scholars, the arguments began. Linguistic experts pored over the runic forms and the language. Many immediately declared it a forgery, pointing to what they saw as glaring anachronisms. The runes used were a mix of styles from different centuries, and the language contained modern Swedish elements that would not have been present in the 14th century. The very phraseology, some argued, felt more like the romanticized Old Norse of 19th century novels than a genuine medieval carving. Furthermore, critics noted that the man who found it, Olof Oman, was a literate Swedish immigrant, perfectly capable of creating such an inscription himself, perhaps as a prank or an expression of pride in his heritage. Yet the stone refused to yield a simple answer. As decades passed, other researchers brought different tools to the mystery. Geologists examined the weathering within the carved grooves. Some studies suggested that the breakdown of the minerals inside the inscriptions was consistent with several centuries of exposure, not a few decades. The patina, the hard layer that forms on exposed stone, appeared continuous over both the stone's surface and the carved letters, implying they were carved long before Oman's time. These physical clues introduced a persistent doubt into the forgery theory, a wrinkle that could not be easily smoothed away, so we are left with 2 compelling yet opposing narratives. One paints the stone as a beautiful, poignant hoax, In this version, a homesick settler, steeped in the sagas of his ancestors and the exciting theories of pre-Columbian contact circulating in his day, carefully crafted a relic. He gave his community and his descendants a tangible link to a glorious, imagined past, placing Minnesota on the map of Viking legend. The other narrative accepts the geological hints and asks us to consider a staggering possibility. What if a small, lost band of late medieval Norse, descendants of the original Vinland settlers, or a wholly separate expedition, did push incredibly far inland, following rivers and lakes into the continent's heart? Their journey would have been one of unimaginable hardship and isolation, ending in tragedy, their story left for centuries under a Minnesota oak tree. The Kensington runestone, therefore, is more than an artifact. It is a cultural mirror. It reflects our deep desire to find ourselves in the grand narrative of exploration, to connect the old world with the new in a direct, physical way. Whether a farmer's clever creation or a genuine, misplaced page from a lost saga, its power lies in the questions it forces us to hold. It embodies the enduring allure of the what if, a massive stone question mark that sits at the crossroads of hope, skepticism, and the timeless human urge to leave a mark and to discover that someone from somewhere else might have been here first. Deep within the crypts of an Egyptian temple, carved in stone, is an image that seems to leap from the pages of a modern textbook. On a wall of the Temple of Hathor at Dendera, a bas-relief shows two figures standing beside a strange and compelling object. It is large, elongated, and bulb-shaped, with a sinuous, snake-like form winding through its center. This serpent is connected by a cable to a box held by a kneeling figure, and the entire assembly is supported by a pillar. To a viewer living in the age of electricity, the resemblance is immediate and startling. It looks for all the world like a giant, ancient light bulb with its filament, socket, and power supply. This is the carving that has become known as the Dendera light, and for proponents of alternative history, it is a clear depiction of forgotten technology, proof that the ancient Egyptians harnessed electric illumination to light their tombs and temples. The idea is undeniably captivating. It offers a neat, technological solution to the old question of how intricate artwork was executed in the pitch-black depths of subterranean chambers without covering everything in soot from torches. It suggests a civilization far more advanced than we credit, their knowledge lost in the sands. Yet, to understand this carving, we must step out of our modern, industrial mindset and enter the symbolic world of the people who actually created it. Egyptologists point to a wealth of context that frames the image not as an electrical diagram, but as a profound religious statement. The object is not a bulb, but a representation of a lotus flower, a potent symbol of creation and rebirth in Egyptian mythology. The snake within it is the god Harsomptus, a manifestation of the sun god at dawn. The scene is a visual encapsulation of a creation myth, showing the moment the sun, in the form of a serpent, is born from the primordial lotus that emerged from the waters of chaos at the beginning of time. The kneeling figure is not an electrician but a priest presenting the sacred symbol. The pillar is a jed pillar, a symbol of stability, and the box is a container for the divine power. Every element has a precise, well-documented mythological meaning. This interpretation does not diminish the carving's wonder, it simply redirects it. The Dendera relief is not about illuminating a room, but about illuminating a cosmic truth. It is a theological statement carved in stone, using a visual language that was perfectly clear to its intended audience. The so-called Dendera light serves as a perfect case study in the clash of perspectives. It shows how our own technological frame of reference can act as a powerful filter, causing us to see our own inventions in the sacred art of the past. We look at a symbolic serpent and see a filament, we see a mythic container and imagine a glass envelope. the mystery it presents is not an ancient one, but a modern one, born from our own desire to find echoes of ourselves in the distant past. It challenges us to ask a difficult but essential question. When we encounter something that seems out of place, are we uncovering a lost piece of technology, or are we witnessing the loss of a different kind of knowledge? The ability to read the rich, symbolic language of a civilization that saw the universe in terms of gods, myths, and eternal cycles of renewal. A metal wedge found in the earth can cut through our assumptions as easily as through soil. In 1974, construction workers digging a trench along the banks of the Mureș River in Aiud, Romania, uncovered something unexpected. Buried deep, about 30 feet down, they found two large mastodon bones. Nestled alongside them was a heavy, strange-looking metal object. It was shaped like a wedge or an axe head, heavily corroded, and weighed about 5 pounds. Initial analysis revealed it was composed primarily of aluminum, an astonishing 89%, with smaller amounts of copper, zinc, and other trace elements. This composition is the heart of the enigma. Aluminum is the most abundant metal in the Earth's crust, but it is never found in a pure, metallic state in nature. It is always locked tightly within minerals, requiring immense energy to break free. The modern industrial process to produce aluminum, electrolysis, was not perfected until the 1880s. For this object to exist, someone had to have mastered a technology over 10,000 years ahead of its time, if the context of its discovery was to be believed. That context was both compelling and deeply problematic. The object was found in a layer associated with Pleistocene-era fossils, the time of mastodons and mammoths. If the stratigraphy was undisturbed, this aluminum wedge would date to a time when humanity was using stone tools, a glaring metallic anachronism. It was a story that seemed to defy the very timeline of human progress. Yet, as with so many of these finds, the closer one looks, the more the simple story fractures. The key question is one of intrusion. Could a modern object have worked its way down into those ancient layers? The site was a construction zone, and the trench was dug with heavy machinery. Critics point out that the object bears a strong resemblance to a tooth from a modern excavator bucket, a part designed to dig into hard earth and rock. Such a part, broken off during earlier work, could have been kicked, buried, or deliberately pushed deep into the sediment, later to be discovered alongside genuinely ancient bones. The mix of metals in the wedge is also consistent with certain 20th century alloys, not some unknown ancient metallurgical recipe. The debate around the Aiud wedge is less about the object itself and more about the integrity of the ground that held it. It is a masterclass in why context is everything in archaeology. A single item, divorced from its original setting, is just a curiosity. Its meaning, its true age, its story, all come from the soil around it, the artifacts beside it, and the unbroken story of the layers above and below. When that context is disturbed, the story is lost, and we are left with a tantalizing, frustrating puzzle. The wedge forces a critical distinction. It is not necessarily evidence of an impossible past, but rather a stark reminder of how easily the past and present can become entangled in the earth. It teaches us that before we can rewrite history with a single discovery, we must first be certain we are reading the right page, and that no modern lines have been scribbled in the margins of an ancient text. 2.8 billion years is a span of time that defies human comprehension. It is an era so ancient that the very continents were unrecognizable, and the only life on Earth was microscopic, thriving in oceans under an alien sky. It was in rock formations from this unimaginably distant past, in the mines near Archaeological, South Africa, that miners began to find curious objects. They were small spheres, rarely more than an inch or two across, made of a bluish metallic mineral. Most intriguing were the fine, parallel grooves that ran like latitudinal lines around many of them, giving them an appearance that is undeniably, eerily artificial. These are the Klerksdorp spheres, and to the untrained eye, they look for all the world like tiny, manufactured ball bearings or some form of ancient ammunition, lost in stone that formed before animals or plants ever existed. The contradiction is jarring. How could a precision object exist in a world that had not yet invented a single cell with a nucleus? The intuitive leap is dramatic, suggesting perhaps a lost, non-human intelligence, or even visitors from beyond our world, leaving behind these metallic marbles as silent markers. Geology, however, offers a different, yet no less fascinating narrative. Experts in mineral formation identify these spheres as concretions. They are not manufactured but grown. In the soft, muddy sediments of that primordial world, minerals like pyrite, also known as fool's gold or hematite, began to crystallize. Under very specific conditions, this crystallization can occur radially, outward from a central point, naturally forming a sphere as the mineral replaces the surrounding sediment. The grooves that seem so perfectly machined are likely natural ridges, formed as the concretion grew in layers within the sediment, or as later geological pressures etched lines into the once smooth surface. Some spheres even show a fibrous internal structure that is a known characteristic of such mineral growth, so we are presented with two very different stories. One is a story of impossible antiquity and alien craftsmanship. The other is a story of patient, inorganic artistry, where chemistry and geology over millions of years conspire to create forms of stunning symmetry. The true lesson of the Klerksdorp spheres is not about lost civilizations, but about the profound creativity of natural processes. They stand as a humbling reminder that nature is the ultimate sculptor, capable of producing shapes so regular, so seemingly designed, that they trick our pattern-seeking minds into seeing intention where there is only accident and immense time. These miniature worlds from the Precambrian challenge us to refine our sight, to learn the difference between the signature of a tool and the signature of a timeless physical law. They ask us to wonder which is more marvelous, the idea of a forgotten maker, or the reality of a universe that can, through simple rules, craft a perfect sphere in the dark, 2.8 billion years before anyone was there to see it. The natural artistry of geology can create forms that mimic human design with uncanny accuracy, but sometimes the opposite is true. In 1885, at a coal mine in Wolfsegg, Austria, a worker splitting a freshly mined block of tertiary-era coal made a startling discovery. Embedded within the ancient carbon was a solid, heavy object. When cleaned, it revealed itself as a block of nearly pure iron, roughly cube-shaped, though with rounded edges and a deep groove running around its middle. It was promptly named the Wolfsegg iron, though its geometric form would later earn it the more dramatic title, the Salzburg cube. The context was everything. The coal seam from which it came was dated to a period millions of years before modern humans walked the earth. Here was a manufactured-looking metal object, seemingly sealed inside a tomb of prehistoric plant matter. The implications were as profound as they were perplexing. Could it be a relic of a lost, non-human civilization, or even evidence of ancient extraterrestrial visitors? The artifact quickly became a celebrated anomaly, a physical challenge to the established timeline of life on our planet. The mystery, however, began to unravel upon closer scientific inspection. Later, more rigorous analysis in the 20th century revealed crucial details. The cube was not a perfect geometric form, and its composition was identified as a type of cast iron. Most tellingly, the specific method used to produce it was recognized. It was likely created through a process known as lost wax casting, a technique used for centuries to make precise metal components. This shifted the entire narrative. The leading theory today is far more terrestrial, though no less interesting for understanding how history becomes muddled. The wolf's egg iron is almost certainly a piece of industrial debris from a much later period. It could have been a counterweight or a component from mining equipment itself, perhaps from an earlier, undocumented operation on the same site. Through some accident, this man-made object fell or was discarded into a crevice or a pit. Over time, natural processes like the slow accumulation of peat and vegetation buried it. That organic material eventually compressed into coal, encasing the iron block in a new, deceptively ancient shell. The mine worker in 1885 simply broke open a package that nature had spent centuries wrapping. So the wolf's egg iron transforms from a cosmic mystery into a powerful lesson in archaeological context. It stands as a perfect example of how the past and the recent past can become entangled in the geological record. An object from one era can be physically embraced by the materials of a vastly older one, creating a perfect illusion of anachronism. This does not diminish its value as a find, but rather redirects our curiosity. It asks us to look beyond the initial, thrilling contradiction and to consider the slower, quieter stories of how the Earth itself can curate its own museum of mistakes, placing a piece of industrial age iron on a shelf labeled with a date from the Age of Giants. Buried in a tomb from the final decades of the Aztec Empire lies a face that does not belong. In 1933, during excavations at the Calixtlahuaca site in the valley of Toluca, Mexico, archaeologists uncovered a small terracotta head. It was found in a burial offering, a context that firmly dated its placement to sometime between 1476 and 1510 of the Common Era, the era just before and during the Spanish arrival. The head itself, however, was a complete stylistic shock. It bore none of the hallmarks of Mesoamerican art. Instead, it displayed the clear, classical features of Roman sculpture from the Old World. The figure had a full, stylized beard, a hairstyle with a distinct topknot, and the serene, idealized facial structure typical of Roman portraiture from the 2nd or 3rd century. It was as if a piece of ancient Rome had been carefully placed in a grave halfway across the world, centuries after Rome itself had fallen. This is the Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca Head, and it presents one of the most visually striking anomalies in the archaeological record. The immediate, breathtaking theory is one of pre-Columbian transoceanic contact. Could a Roman vessel, perhaps blown hopelessly off course, have somehow made the impossible journey across the Atlantic, its sole surviving relic traded or kept as a curiosity until it was finally buried with honor? It is a narrative that captures the imagination, suggesting threads of connection woven across oceans long before the history books say it was possible. Yet the head story is wrapped in layers of uncertainty that prevent any simple conclusion. The primary challenge is one of provenance. While the burial context seemed secure, the excavation in the 1930s was not conducted with the meticulous, controlled standards expected today. This leaves a persistent, nagging question about the integrity of the archaeological layer. Could this artifact have been introduced later, either accidentally or intentionally? The possibility of a hoax exists, though the head was found by a respected archaeologist, not a treasure hunter. A more plausible, though less dramatic, explanation is intrusion. The site saw activity long after the Spanish conquest. It is conceivable that a Spanish colonist, perhaps a collector of classical curiosities brought from Europe, owned this Roman artifact. Through some event, it could have been lost or deliberately placed, later becoming mixed into the older strata, creating a perfect archaeological illusion. Scientific analysis has added intriguing but not definitive data. Thermoluminescence dating, which measures when the clay was last fired, was performed on the head. The results suggested an age range between 900 and 1270 years old, a time frame that could place its creation in the classical Roman period, yet also overlaps with the medieval era in Europe. This does not prove it traveled to Mexico anciently, only that the object itself is old, so we are left with a haunting, lonely figure. The Tecaxic-Calixtlahuaca Head is not proof of Romans in the New World. It is instead a powerful symbol of the gaps in our knowledge. It represents the tantalizing possibility that the map of ancient human movement was far more complex, with objects traveling incredible distances through networks we can barely trace. Whether it is evidence of a miraculous voyage, a colonial mix-up, or something else entirely, its silent, stony gaze challenges the neat borders we draw around ancient cultures. It asks us to hold space for the strange, the singular, and the unexplained, those lonely artifacts that remind us that history, in its vast and winding course, may still have secrets tucked away in unmarked graves. High on the desolate Tibetan plateau, the wind scours the slopes of Mount Bagong. Here, in a landscape that feels more like the surface of Mars than a cradle of industry, visitors report finding something utterly incongruous. Embedded directly into the solid rock are what appear to be rusted iron pipes. They are of various diameters, some as wide as 1.5 feet across, others no thicker than a toothpick. They run in seemingly purposeful lines, with reports suggesting they converge and lead toward the shores of the nearby Tossan Lake, a saltwater body. The rock that holds them is part of a geological formation dated to many millions of years in age, a time when humanity's ancestors were not yet a glimmer in the evolutionary story. The immediate interpretation is as dramatic as the setting. This looks like the remnants of ancient, monumental plumbing, a sophisticated network installed by a forgotten civilization in a remote, inhospitable place. The pipes seem to whisper of advanced engineers who solved problems we can barely comprehend, their work now fossilized and rusting under an endless sky. Yet geology, the patient storyteller of our planet, offers a different and equally marvelous narrative. Experts who study such formations propose that the Bagong pipes are likely not pipes at all, but extraordinary examples of natural sculpture. The process begins with something organic and ancient, like the sprawling root system of a large tree. When such a tree dies and decays, it leaves behind long, tubular hollows in the sediment. Over immense spans of time, mineral-rich water percolates through these empty spaces. Elements like iron and silica dissolved in the water begin to precipitate out, slowly and meticulously filling the voids. The result is a perfect mineral cast of the original root, a hollow or solid tube of ironstone or similar rock that retains the shape and even the branching structure of the biological template. Wind and erosion then expose these incredibly durable casts, which now look for all the world like manufactured conduits welded into the mountainside. The varying diameters mimic different root sizes, and their convergence mirrors the way roots gather at a central trunk. This explanation does not rob the sight of its wonder, it simply redirects it. The Bagong Formation becomes a testament not to human industry, but to the patient, artistic force of planetary chemistry. It showcases how nature, given enough time, can produce structures of such startling regularity and apparent purpose that they perfectly mimic the artifacts of a thinking mind. This phenomenon plays a profound trick on our perception. We are a species hardwired to see patterns and assign agency. When we encounter straight lines, parallel forms, and convergent structures, our first instinct is to see a maker. The Bagong piles challenge that instinct, asking us to distinguish between the signature of a tool and the signature of a timeless, inorganic process. They stand as a humbling lesson in scale, reminding us that the Earth has been its own engineer for billions of years, crafting mysteries in stone and mineral that await only our curious and sometimes mistaken gaze to be called a mystery at all. A stone can tell a story, but the story we hear often depends on who is selling it. From a private collection comes an object known as the genetic disc, a circular slab of black stone, roughly a foot in diameter. Its surface is meticulously carved with a series of small, intricate images arranged in a circular pattern. To a modern eye, these symbols are startlingly familiar. Some appear to depict the moment of fertilization with a sperm cell approaching an ovum. Others show various stages of cell division, the splitting of a single cell into many. Most striking are the renderings of what look like developing fetuses in different positions within a womb. If authentic, and if created by a pre-Columbian culture in Colombia as claimed, this artifact would be a cataclysm for the history of science. It would suggest an ancient civilization possessed a microscopic, cellular understanding of human reproduction 1,000 years before the invention of the microscope, knowledge that was utterly impossible by the standards of conventional archaeology. The narrative it implies is irresistibly powerful, a lost chapter where biology was understood not through observation, but perhaps through some other profound insight. Yet the disc carries with it a silence far more telling than its carvings. There is no archaeological provenance, no record exists of its discovery in a controlled dig, no documentation of the soil layer that held it, no associated artifacts found alongside it. It simply appeared, a solitary wonder with a price tag and a story. This complete absence of context is the first and most fatal flaw. In the world of genuine archaeology, an object without a documented find site is an orphan, its history and meaning almost impossible to verify. The disc's stylistic elements also raise red flags. The visual language of the carvings, the way the biological forms are represented, aligns suspiciously well with modern textbook diagrams, not with the symbolic or stylized artistic traditions of ancient Colombian cultures. It feels like a translation of 20th century knowledge into an archaic medium. Like the Ica stones before it, the genetic disc is almost certainly a sophisticated modern creation. It is a forgery born not from malice but from a market, a physical manifestation of our deep desire to find confirmation that ancient peoples knew more than we think. It is crafted to exploit that very fascination, to provide a tangible, seemingly undeniable piece of evidence for a revolutionary past. The forger, in this case, aimed high, targeting not just general curiosity but our awe at the hidden machinery of life itself. This makes the disc a particularly poignant cautionary tale. It reminds us that the most compelling anomalies are not those that shout the loudest from private collections, but those that whisper from within the rigorous, documented layers of the earth. A true mystery invites scrutiny. It withstands the questions of where, when, and with what. The genetic disc, for all its intricate beauty, fails this fundamental test. It serves not as a window into lost biology, but as a mirror reflecting our own yearning to connect with a past that seems wiser, more advanced, and more in tune with secrets we have only recently begun to unravel ourselves. Gold has a way of preserving not just wealth but imagination. In the highlands of Colombia, the Quimbaya people, who flourished around 1,000 years after the Common Era, left behind a stunning legacy in this precious metal. Among their many exquisite creations is a collection of small, intricate pendants and ornaments. To the traditional archaeologist, these are beautiful examples of zoomorphic art, stylized representations of the natural world that surrounded the culture. They see the sleek curves of a bird in flight, the bulbous body of a beetle, or the sinuous form of a fish. The artifacts are masterpieces of symbolic craftsmanship, their forms smoothed and streamlined by artistic convention over generations. But shift your perspective just slightly, place one of these objects on a table under a modern light, and something remarkable happens. The shape seems to twist, to realign itself with a different century. That is not a bird, it is a delta-wing aircraft. The rounded head becomes a cockpit canopy. The flat, horizontal wings and distinct vertical tail fin look less like fins and more like the stabilizers of a jet fighter. This visual echo is so strong it has launched a compelling, alternative narrative. For those who see evidence of lost advanced knowledge, the Quimbaya artifacts are not jewelry at all. They are scale models, perhaps even blueprints for ancient flying machines. The resemblance is uncanny enough that modern enthusiasts have created enlarged replicas of these forms and tested them. In wind tunnels and during free flight, some of these models have demonstrated stable gliding characteristics. They can, with a gentle launch, sail through the air with a surprising grace. This empirical result adds a layer of tangible intrigue to the visual argument. It suggests these shapes are not merely decorative, but are somehow aerodynamically sound, as if their creators understood principles of lift and stability. So, are we looking at proof of pre-Columbian aviation? The archaeological community maintains a firm, context-based interpretation. The Quimbaya were brilliant metallurgists and artists, deeply connected to their ecosystem. Every animal they depicted held spiritual and cultural significance. The streamlined forms are a result of artistic evolution, a desire to capture the essence of a creature in a wearable piece of art, not to document a machine. The fact that some shapes glide could be a happy accident of that streamlining, a byproduct of creating a form that is balanced and aesthetically pleasing, much like a well-thrown skipping stone. The true mystery of the Quimbaya artifacts, therefore, lies not in the gold itself, but in the lens through which we examine it. This is a puzzle of perception. Are we seeing ancient artistry through the unavoidable filter of our own technological age, imposing a meaning that was never there? Or is there a faint, distant possibility that these forms encode an observation, a dream of flight that was given shape by hands working in gold a millennium ago? The artifacts themselves remain silent, holding their form but not their intent. They challenge us to separate what we know from what we hope, to recognize that sometimes the most fascinating anomalies are those that live in the space between an ancient artist's hand and a modern viewer's eye. A space where a bird can become a jet, and a piece of jewelry can carry the weight of a 1,000-year-old question about the boundaries of human ingenuity. Beneath the clear, blue waves off Japan's southernmost island, the seafloor holds a secret that defies simple classification. In 1986, a local diver exploring the waters near Yonaguni Island came upon a site that seemed to belong in a myth. Rising from the ocean depths was a colossal structure, a monolith of stone over 250 feet long. Its surfaces were unnaturally flat, meeting in sharp 90-degree angles. There were what looked like wide, staggered terraces, like the steps of a sunken pyramid, and deep, straight channels that cut across the rock face. This is the Yonaguni Monument, and from the moment it was discovered, it presented the world with a breathtaking question. Was this a natural geological formation, a masterpiece of underwater erosion, or was it the drowned architecture of a civilization lost to rising seas? The formation rests about 80 feet below the surface, a silent, sprawling puzzle in a realm of shifting light and darting fish. Its proponents, led by the researcher who first brought it to wide attention, point to features that feel undeniably intentional. They highlight two tall, pillar-like stones that appear to support a massive horizontal slab, resembling a ceremonial gate or a roof. They note the perfect right angles and parallel lines, which seem to obey a logic of design rather than random chance. The most striking element is a platform that looks like a carved altar with a circular depression at its center. If this structure were on land, many would immediately call it a monument. The narrative it suggests is epic, a city or temple complex built on dry land over 10,000 years ago, during the last ice age when sea levels were dramatically lower. As the glaciers melted and the oceans rose, this place was slowly, irrevocably swallowed, its story submerged until a diver's chance discovery. It is a haunting vision of a forgotten chapter in human history, a potential Atlantis in the Pacific. Geologists, however, listen to a different story, one told by the stone itself and the relentless forces that shape it. They identify the rock as sandstone, a sedimentary stone that naturally fractures along flat plains. In this region, powerful tectonic activity has uplifted the seafloor, exposing these sandstone beds to the ocean's might. The constant, directional pounding of tidal currents acts like a sandblaster, scouring and undercutting the rock along its natural fault line. This process, known as shore platform erosion, can create remarkably flat surfaces, sharp edges, and even step-like formations as softer layers wear away faster than harder ones. On the nearby coast of Yonaguni Island itself, one can see identical formations above the waterline, textbook examples of this natural sculpting. The pillars and the so-called altar, geologists argue, are simply more resistant blocks of stone that have remained as the material around them eroded away. The circular depression could be a natural pothole formed by swirling pebbles in a current. From this perspective, the monument is not a ruin, but a magnificent work of art created by the patient, unimaginable force of moving water over millennia. So where does the truth lie? The Yonaguni monument exists in that profound space between what nature can create and what the human mind insists on seeing. Our brains are wired to find patterns, to impose order on chaos. When we see straight lines and right angles, we instinctively think builder, planner, architect. The ocean offers no such intentions, only the slow, algorithmic grind of physics. Yet, the scale and the haunting regularity of the formation keep a sliver of doubt alive, a persistent wonder that maybe, just maybe, human hands did touch these stones. It serves as a powerful metaphor for our entire journey. It challenges us to hold two possibilities in balance at once, to appreciate the staggering artistry of natural forces while remaining open to the idea that the past may be far stranger and more capacious than our textbooks allow. The monument does not demand a verdict, it simply rests in its aquatic silence, inviting us to look, to question, and to marvel at the endless capacity of our world, and perhaps our ancestors, to create mysteries that ripple through time. The silent stones of Yonaguni challenge us to separate natural wonder from human design, a test that becomes even more critical when we examine the stories we build upon the remains of the past. In the baked earth of the Indus Valley, the ruins of Mohenjo-Daro stand as a monument to a different kind of mystery, one born not from the ocean, but from a dramatic reinterpretation of evidence. This ancient city, a jewel of a sophisticated civilization that thrived over 4,000 years ago, shows clear signs of a sudden and puzzling abandonment. Streets that once bustled with life were left still, and buildings were deserted. In the 1920s, early excavations uncovered something that would later fuel an extraordinary myth: a number of human remains found in what appeared to be contorted, sudden positions, some even lying in the streets. Combined with layers of ash and vitrified material found at the site, a sensational narrative was constructed by some alternative thinkers. They proposed that Mohenjo-Daro had been destroyed in a catastrophic event of unimaginable scale, an ancient nuclear explosion. The skeletons were victims of a sudden, searing blast, and the vitrified stone was evidence of intense heat, a direct parallel to the aftermath of modern atomic tests. It is a story that taps directly into our deepest anxieties about technology and annihilation, projecting a contemporary fear onto a canvas thousands of years old. Archaeological research, however, paints a far more gradual, though no less significant, picture of the city's end. The skeletons, upon closer examination, are not from a single catastrophic event. They are from later haphazard burials that intruded into the abandoned city layers, their positions the result of natural processes and the simple collapse of time, not a moment of instant destruction. The layers of ash are consistent with the burning of ordinary materials like wood and reed, the remnants of a city that was periodically flooded, rebuilt, and eventually left to decay. The vitrified material, often cited as proof of extreme heat, is more likely to be the result of localized high-temperature fires, perhaps from kilns or burning stockpiles of fuel, a common occurrence in any urban center. The true reasons for Mohenjo-Daro's decline were likely a complex interplay of environmental and social pressures. The climate of the region grew more arid. The mighty Indus River shifted its course away from the city, choking its agricultural lifeline. Trade routes may have changed, and internal social structures could have strained under these mounting challenges. The end was probably not a single day of fire, but a slow, relentless draining of vitality until the last resident simply walked away. The myth of an ancient nuclear war at Mohenjo-Daro is a powerful case study in how we read the past. It demonstrates how ambiguous archaeological evidence, when stripped of its nuanced context, can be stretched to fit a pre-existing, sensational narrative. We see what we are primed to see. In an age aware of nuclear power, we find its shadow in ancient ash. The story is compelling because it is simple, dramatic, and connects our modern world to a mysterious ancient one in a visceral way. Yet it overlooks the profound, human-scale reality, a civilization that grappled with shifting rivers and changing rains, and ultimately made the difficult choice to leave home. This myth asks us to reflect on a crucial distinction. Are we seeking to understand the past on its own terms, or are we searching for mirrors that reflect our own time, our own technologies, and our own fears? The real legacy of Mohenjo-Daro is not a warning about lost weapons, but a testament to human resilience in the face of environmental change, and a reminder that the most enduring mysteries are often solved not by invoking the fantastic, but by patiently listening to the quiet, complex story the Earth has to tell. A perfect crystal skull captures the light, and with it the imagination. These hauntingly beautiful objects, carved from single blocks of clear or milky quartz, have become iconic symbols of ancient mystery. Often attributed to the Aztec or Maya, they are said to hold psychic powers, to be repositories of lost knowledge, or even tools for communication across time. Their flawless surfaces and impossible craftsmanship suggest a technology beyond our understanding, a gift from a vanished world of advanced spiritual science. The most famous of all, the Mitchell-Hedges skull, named for the adventurer who claimed his daughter found it in a Mayan temple in the 1920s, is the star of this compelling legend. With its detachable jaw and mesmerizing clarity, it seems too perfect to be the work of human hands. For decades, these skulls stood as glittering proof of a past that defied explanation. But the true story of the crystal skulls is not one of ancient magic, but of modern desire. When subjected to the cold, precise gaze of scientific analysis, the romantic narrative begins to fracture. Researchers examining the skulls under high-powered microscopes made a critical discovery. The fine marks left by the carving tools were not the irregular scratches of hand-powered stone abrasives used by pre-Columbian artisans. Instead, they showed the telltale, symmetrical grooves and consistent patterning of modern, high-speed rotary tools, instruments powered by electricity that did not exist until the 19th century. The evidence was etched into the crystal itself, a silent confession of their true age. Further investigation into their origins points not to the jungles of Central America, but to the workshops of Europe, particularly in Germany in the late 1800s. This was an era of intense fascination with archaeology and the exotic. Museums and wealthy collectors were eager to acquire treasures from lost civilizations, creating a booming market. Skilled lapidaries, masters of cutting gemstones, found they could use their modern equipment to produce these stunning, spiritually charged objects, feeding a hunger for the mysterious. They were crafted not as forgeries to deceive experts, but as romantic artifacts for a public eager to believe. The Mitchell-Hedges skull itself is shrouded in a provenance as cloudy as poor-quality quartz. No credible evidence supports its discovery in a Mayan temple, and its history before the 1920s is unverified. It likely followed the same path from a European workshop into the hands of a showman who understood the power of a good story. So what are we left with when the myth is stripped away? The crystal skulls lose none of their beauty, but their meaning transforms entirely. Their true mystery is a historical one, a window into the colonial era's complex relationship with indigenous cultures. They represent a time when the ancient world was seen as a source of spectacle and mystery to be owned, often reinterpreted through a European lens. They are artifacts of romanticism, of a longing for a past that felt more magical and connected than the industrial present. And in a way, that longing is what gives them enduring power. The legend of the crystal skulls persists because it speaks to a deep human need to believe that the past holds wisdom so profound it borders on the supernatural, and that physical objects can be vessels for that lost insight. They teach us that sometimes the most potent relics are not those that convey ancient truth, but those that reveal the timeless truths about ourselves, our hopes, and the stories we choose to buy, both literally and figuratively, to make the world feel more wondrous. The sandstone walls of Karyong, near the modern skyline of Sydney, hold a silent message carved in a language of ancient kings. These are the Gosford glyphs, a collection of roughly 300 figures etched into the soft rock. To an untrained eye, they look for all the world like the sacred script of the Nile, hieroglyphs depicting birds, snakes, and familiar Egyptian symbols. The narrative they seem to tell is one of epic, impossible voyage. Proponents describe them as the work of ancient Egyptian sailors, shipwrecked on this distant shore thousands of years ago, leaving behind a tragic account of their loss and a plea to the gods. It is a story that connects two iconic ancient worlds across an unthinkable expanse of ocean, a physical diary of the earliest global explorers. The emotional pull is powerful, suggesting a hidden thread in the human story that ties the outback to the pyramids. Yet when the actual symbols are placed before the eyes of those who dedicate their lives to reading them, the story changes entirely. Professional Egyptologists and linguists who have examined the glyphs are unanimous in their assessment. The characters are a haphazard collage, a mix of styles from different Egyptian dynasties that would never appear together in a genuine inscription. The grammar is nonsensical, the sequence is meaningless. The carvings show a fundamental misunderstanding of how hieroglyphic writing actually functioned, more akin to copying shapes from a book than composing a text. The tool marks themselves appear fresh, lacking the deep, weathered patina expected of millennia-old stonework. The most likely origin points not to the age of pharaohs, but to the 20th century, perhaps the work of returning Australian soldiers who had served in Egypt during the World Wars, combining souvenir memories with local folklore. This conclusion is underscored by the knowledge holders of the land itself. The local Aboriginal communities, whose connection to this landscape spans tens of thousands of years, have no oral history, no songline, and no tradition that speaks of these carvings or of visitors from ancient Egypt. The glyphs are absent from their profound and continuous narrative of place. This is where the Gosford glyphs offer a lesson that goes far beyond authentication. They highlight a subtle but significant tension in how we search for mystery. In the rush to find a spectacular, imported story, a narrative of lost Egyptians, there is a risk of overlooking the deep, rich, and authentic history that is already present. The genuine ancient story of Australia is one of the world's oldest continuous cultures, with art, astronomy, and law etched into the land in ways we are still learning to comprehend. By focusing on a likely modern fabrication that mimics another culture, we can inadvertently silence the true, ancient voices of the place. The glyphs ask us to reflect on where we direct our sense of wonder. Do we seek only mysteries that connect distant, romanticized civilizations, or can we cultivate a deeper awe for the profound and real mysteries that have existed here for over 60,000 years? A history written not in mistaken hieroglyphs, but in the very stars, stones, and stories of the first peoples. This case becomes a metaphor for respectful inquiry, reminding us that the most compelling history is often not the one we wish to import, but the one that has been patiently waiting to be heard, rooted firmly in the soil upon which we stand. Stitched into the very fabric of a 2,000-year-old funeral mantle is a story that feels both intimately local and strangely familiar. This is the Paracas textile, a breathtaking masterpiece of woven art from the coastal deserts of ancient Peru. Created by the Paracas culture, a people renowned for their intricate textiles and elaborate burial practices, this cloth served as a sacred wrapping, a final, beautiful garment for an individual's journey. Its central field is a marvel of color and geometric design, but it is the border that stops the modern viewer cold. Along its edge runs a continuous frieze of stylized, embroidered figures. They are arranged in a procession, a narrative sequence where each small character seems to act out a part in a larger, unspoken tale. The visual echo is immediate and startling for anyone who has seen one of Europe's most famous historical artifacts. It looks, in its form and function, almost identical to the narrative style of the Bayeux tapestry. That medieval embroidery, created in 11th century England, famously chronicles the events leading to the Norman conquest with a similar linear procession of figures. The two works are separated by over 8,000 miles of ocean and more than 1,000 years of history. They were made by cultures that had absolutely no contact with one another, no shared language, and no common artistic tradition. Yet here they are, two textiles from opposite ends of the earth, using the same fundamental visual language to tell a story. This is not a case of hidden contact or a lost voyage. It is something perhaps more profound, a powerful demonstration of convergent creative thought. When a human society seeks to record a complex event, to freeze a sequence of actions into a static image, certain solutions present themselves naturally. A linear border on a long cloth provides a perfect, continuous canvas. Placing figures in sequence along that border creates a timeline that the eye can follow, panel by panel, scene by scene. Both the Paracas weaver and the Norman embroiderer arrived at this elegant solution independently, guided by the same human impulse to narrate and to preserve. The Paracas figures tell a story of their own world, likely involving deities, rituals, or mythic histories central to their cosmology. They are not depicting Norman knights. But the structural parallel is undeniable. This artifact challenges a subtle assumption we often carry, the idea that cultural development was a series of isolated, unique experiments. The Paracas textile suggests instead that the human mind, when faced with similar artistic problems, can weave strikingly similar answers, even from threads spun on different continents. It reminds us that innovation is not always about invention in a vacuum, but about the universal application of human ingenuity to the materials and challenges at hand. This funeral mantle, meant to honor an individual's passing, ultimately speaks to a connection far greater than any single culture. It is a quiet, threadbare testament to a shared human instinct, the desire to turn story into substance and to leave behind a record that says, in colors that fade but patterns that endure, this is what happened, this is who we were. From the shared human instinct to weave stories into cloth, we turn to an art that distorts the human form to express what lies beyond it. In the dusty soil of what is now Iraq, the Ubaid culture, flourishing over 6,000 years ago, left behind a legacy of pottery and progress as one of Mesopotamia's earliest societies. Among their most striking creations are small, hand-sculpted figurines that stop the modern viewer cold. These are the Ubaid lizardmen, Crafted from clay and baked in ancient kilns, they depict humanoid bodies in postures of care, often cradling infants. But their faces are something else entirely. They possess elongated, cone-shaped heads, wide, almond-shaped eyes that seem to hold a knowing gaze, and features that read as distinctly reptilian, with slender noses and lipless mouths. To a contemporary eye conditioned by science fiction, the resemblance is uncanny and immediately provocative. It is easy to see in these figures evidence of the extraordinary, a literal depiction of a reptilian race that once walked among humans, or even visitors from beyond our world, their strange visages preserved in humble clay. Archaeology, however, listens to a different story, one told by context and the universal language of symbolic art. These figurines were not found in isolation as shocking anomalies. They were part of a material culture discovered in burial contexts and settlement sites, items that held meaning for the people who made and used them. Scholars of ancient Mesopotamia see in these forms not a documentary record, but a profound spiritual expression. The exaggerated features are a deliberate artistic choice, a set of visual codes. An elongated skull denoted intelligence, wisdom, or a connection to the divine. Those large, piercing eyes symbolized all-seeing knowledge, an ability to perceive realms invisible to ordinary people. The reptilian aspects may have linked these figures to concepts of fertility, regeneration, and the primordial power of water, as snakes and lizards were often associated with the life-giving and sometimes dangerous forces of nature in early agricultural societies. Interpretations vary, but a consensus points toward these statuettes representing deities, perhaps a mother goddess and her consort, or ritual priests embodying these divine forces during ceremonies. The act of holding an infant powerfully underscores themes of nurture, lineage, and the continuation of life itself. They are not portraits of aliens, but portraits of belief. The Ubaid artists were not trying to sketch a visitor from another star. They were grappling with the most fundamental human mysteries: birth, death, the cycles of the earth, and the unseen powers that govern them. To make the intangible tangible, they reached for a visual vocabulary that transcended the ordinary human form, creating figures that were explicitly other to communicate the sacred. These quiet clay figures from the dawn of civilization offer a crucial lesson in perspective. They challenge us to recognize that ancient art is a language, and we must learn its grammar before we can translate its stories. When we project our own cultural fascinations onto these objects, we risk becoming illiterate, seeing only our own reflections in the polished surface of a 6,000-year-old mirror. The true mystery of the Ubaid lizardmen is not about who they literally depict, but about the human mind's enduring need to shape the unknown into form, to hold the divine in our hands, even if we must shape it with a face that reminds us we are not alone in the universe, but part of a much larger, more mysterious, and beautifully imagined whole. The human need to contain the sacred finds its most monumental expression not in clay or gold, but in granite. High on the remote Xiang Quang Plateau of Laos, the landscape is dotted with thousands of silent stone sentinels. These are the Plain of Jars, a sprawling field of massive carved containers, some standing nearly 10 feet tall and weighing many tons. Hewn from solid rock during the Southeast Asian Iron Age over 1,000 years ago, their forms are simple yet powerful, cylindrical vessels with a haunting, empty presence. Their sheer scale is the first mystery. How did the people of this region, without the wheel or draft animals, quarry these monoliths, shape them with stone and iron tools, and transport them across miles of rugged, hilly terrain to their final resting places? The logistics alone speak of a society with remarkable organization, patience, and a shared, driving purpose. But it is the purpose itself that has echoed unanswered through the centuries. What were these giant jars meant to hold? The most enduring theory, supported by archaeological finds of human bone fragments and burial goods nearby, points to a profound and ancient funerary practice. Researchers suggest the jars may have been used for a ceremony known as excarnation. In this practice, the remains of a loved one would be placed inside the great stone vessel, exposed to the elements and other natural processes. After a period of time, the family would return to collect the cleansed bones for a final, secondary burial. The jar, then, was not a tomb but a transitional space, a monumental container for a sacred transformation between life and final rest. It was a communal and deeply spiritual piece of architecture, marking not just a loss but a necessary journey. Other possibilities linger, of course. Could they have been vast storage containers for grain or rainwater, securing the community's physical sustenance? Perhaps they held a ceremonial role in feasts or offerings. Yet the presence of human remains and the jar's frequent grouping in specific, landscape-oriented patterns lean heavily toward a ritual, memorial function. They are less like silos and more like silent, stone witnesses to a final farewell. Walking among them today, one feels the weight of that silence. Each jar is a question carved in rock. Who was the person whose journey ended here? What songs were sung, what stories told, when the community gathered around this open stone mouth to honor a passage? The people who made them left no written records, and their cultural memory has faded into the land itself. The jars remain, a sprawling, open-air cemetery for a lost tradition, a testament to a universal human impulse to mark the great mysteries of existence with something permanent, something that says someone was here, and their passing mattered enough to move mountains of stone. They remind us that grief and reverence can be the most powerful architects of all, capable of shaping not just monuments, but the very face of the earth for generations yet unborn to ponder. Sonar paints a picture in sound, a ghost image of the unseen depths. In the summer of 2011, a team of Swedish treasure hunters were sweeping the floor of the Baltic Sea with side-scan sonar, hoping to find sunken cargo. Instead, their screens revealed a shape that made no sense. Resting on the muddy bottom, over 250 feet below the surface, was a near-perfect circle roughly 200 feet across. But it was the detail that ignited global fascination. The sonar return showed a distinct, raised structure on top of the circle, with long, straight lines and sharp angles that seemed to form corridors and staircases. To a world raised on science fiction, the silhouette was unmistakable. It looked for all the world like the Millennium Falcon, Han Solo's iconic starship, parked silently on the ocean floor. The image was a Rorschach test for the imagination, and the theories exploded. Was this a crashed UFO, a visitor from the stars preserved in the cold, dark water? Could it be a secret Nazi anti-submarine device, a lost piece of World War II wonder weaponry? The mystery was magnetic, a perfect modern artifact born not from a shovel, but from pixels on a screen. The anomaly demanded a closer look. Over the next few years, several diving expeditions braved the difficult conditions to visit the site. What they found was both fascinating and deeply clarifying. The object was not metal but stone. It was a colossal glacial erratic, a giant boulder carried and then dropped by retreating Ice Age glaciers over 10,000 years ago. The strange, angular features that looked so artificial on sonar were the result of natural geological processes. The straight lines were likely scratch marks from the glacier itself, or fractures from the immense pressures of the ice. The stair-like formations were step-like cleavage planes in the rock. Adding to the otherworldly appearance were thick, strange formations covering parts of the stone, which samples revealed to be manganese crusts and bacterial mats, living ecosystems that can form bizarre, lumpy textures. The divers reported that their electrical equipment often malfunctioned near the formation, a phenomenon that initially fueled the speculative fire, but this too had a natural explanation. The large mass of metal-rich rock, combined with the conductive properties of salt water, can create localized disturbances in electromagnetic fields, enough to confuse sensitive instruments. So, the Baltic Sea anomaly transformed from a potential starship into a magnificent lesson in perception. It is a case study for the 21st century, showing how our advanced tools can reveal shapes that beg for a story, and how our minds, steeped in culture and cinema, are primed to provide the most extraordinary one first. The real wonder lies not in a hidden alien craft, but in the powerful dialogue between technology and imagination. The sonar did not lie, it simply showed a form. We were the ones who wrote the epic around it, reminded that sometimes the most compelling mysteries are not about what is hidden in the dark, but about the stories we cannot help but see when the light, however faint, finally shines. The sonar's illusion of a starship reminds us that our tools can reveal shapes that beg for a story, but in the high Andes, the story is carved into the mountains themselves. The fortress of Sacsayhuaman, a stone crown overlooking the ancient Inca capital of Cusco, presents a puzzle not of ambiguous sonar blips, but of undeniable tactile perfection. Its walls are a symphony in stone, composed of blocks so colossal they seem like the playthings of giants. Some individual stones weigh over 100 tons, as much as a herd of elephants, and they are not simple rectangles. They are polygonal, each a unique, irregular shape with multiple angles and curves, yet these behemoths fit together with a seamlessness that defies belief. The joints between them are so precise that, even after centuries of earthquakes and weathering, you cannot slide a razor blade or even a piece of paper into the cracks. This is dry stone construction at its most sublime, a monumental jigsaw puzzle assembled without a single drop of mortar. The immediate questions are as massive as the stones themselves. How did the Inca, without the wheel, without iron tools, without draft animals stronger than the llama, quarry these blocks from distant mountainsides? How did they transport them across rugged valleys and up steep slopes? And most mysteriously, how did they achieve such a flawless, interlocking fit? The sheer physical challenge has fueled extraordinary speculation. Some have proposed the use of a now-forgotten plant extract that could soften stone like clay, allowing it to be molded into place. Others, captivated by the scale, have whispered of technologies that manipulated gravity itself, lightening the impossible loads. These ideas speak to our awe, a desire to explain such majesty with an equally majestic secret. The likely truth, however, is no less magnificent for being rooted in human ingenuity. Archaeologists and engineers point to a profound, hard-won understanding of materials. The Inca were master geologists, knowing exactly which stones would fracture cleanly. They likely used a combination of fire setting, where rocks were heated and then doused with water to cause controlled splitting, and meticulous pecking with harder stone hammers. Transportation was a feat of social organization, employing thousands of laborers using ropes, log rollers, and earthen ramps, turning an engineering problem into a communal effort of staggering coordination. The final fitting is the true masterpiece. It is believed that stones were shaped iteratively, a process of trial and error. A block would be roughly positioned, its outline marked on the stone below. Then craftsmen would painstakingly peck and grind the contacting surface, lower the block, check the fit, and repeat over and over until the two faces mirrored each other perfectly. This was not a quick process, but one of immense patience and a deep, almost spiritual, dialogue with the stone. The walls were not just a fortress, they were a statement. The zig-zagging tiers, said to represent the teeth of a puma, symbolized the power and permanence of the Inca Empire. The seamless joints made the structure incredibly resilient to seismic activity, as the locked stones could shift and settle during an earthquake without collapsing. Sacsayhuaman is not a monument to lost super science, but to the zenith of a pre-industrial worldview that blended brute force, exquisite geometry, and an intimate partnership between a civilization and the bones of the earth. It asks us to recalibrate our sense of the possible, to understand that genius can manifest not in hidden technologies, but in the coordinated will of a people who believed they could, and so they did, fitting mountains together one perfect seam at a time. Beneath the quiet villages of Zhejiang, a secret waited in the water. In 1992, a local farmer decided to pump out a small, deep pond, curious about what might lie below. As the water drained away, it revealed not a natural pool, but the entrance to an immense man-made cavern. This was the first of what would become known as the Longyu Caves, a network of 24 colossal underground chambers carved by hand from solid sandstone. Stepping inside is like entering the belly of a stone giant. The scale is almost incomprehensible. Some chambers soar over 100 feet high, with pillars evenly distributed to support the ceiling, creating vast open halls. The walls and ceilings are not rough-hewn. They are covered from floor to apex in a uniform, decorative pattern of parallel chisel marks, a deliberate, rhythmic texture that speaks of immense care and a unified aesthetic vision. This was not a haphazard digging project. This was underground architecture on a staggering scale, executed with a precision that feels almost industrial. The numbers alone are dizzying. The total excavated volume of stone is estimated at nearly 1 million cubic meters. That is enough material to build a small mountain. Yet here lies the first great puzzle. Where did all that stone go? There is no massive spoil heap outside the caves, no trace of that million cubic meters of rubble in the surrounding landscape. It simply vanished as if the earth had swallowed its own tail. The second, deeper mystery is the silence. No historical record, no local legend, no imperial edict or poet's verse makes any mention of this decades-long, generation-spanning project. For a civilization that meticulously documented its grand endeavors, the Longyu Caves are a historical black hole. So why were they built? The theories are as vast as the chambers themselves. Could they have been a secret quarry, providing the beautiful, patterned sandstone for some above-ground city that has since vanished? Perhaps they were fortified storehouses, protecting grain or treasure from war or flood. Their depth and hidden nature suggest defense, a place for an entire community to disappear. Others look to ritual, seeing in these echoing halls a subterranean temple complex, a man-made underworld for ceremonies meant to connect with the Earth's deepest powers. The parallel chisel marks might even hold a clue. Some say they resemble the scales of a dragon, tying the entire complex to ancient mythological symbolism. But with no artifacts, no inscriptions, and no records, every explanation remains a whisper in a cavern. The Longyu Caves stand as a monument to anonymous labor and forgotten purpose. They force us to confront a humbling reality, an entire chapter of human endeavor, one that moved literal mountains of stone, can be completely erased from the written record, surviving only as a silent, echoing space in the dark. They are not just caves, they are a question carved in negative space, asking us what other colossal chapters of our story are still waiting, hidden in plain sight beneath our very feet. But the story of stone jars does not end at the borders of Laos. Far to the west, in the lush green hills of northeast India, the earth holds a similar secret. At sites like Vangchia in the state of Mizoram, explorers have found fields of large, cylindrical stone jars and towering monoliths, silent and weathered. They stand in clearings surrounded by jungle, in a haunting echo of the plain of jars thousands of miles away. The resemblance is uncanny, yet the connection is a profound mystery. Were these sites part of a single, vast cultural sphere, a network of communities that shared a common belief in marking the landscape with these solemn stone vessels? Or did two distinct cultures, separated by formidable mountains and rivers, arrive independently at the same monumental solution to a universal human question? how to honor the departed and mark sacred space. The Indian jars are far less studied than their Laotian cousins, adding a layer of quiet urgency to their mystery. Many sit in remote areas, documented only in passing, their stories still tightly woven into the local soil and folklore. This parallel phenomenon stretches our map of prehistoric Southeast Asia. It hints at a world more interconnected than we once thought, where ideas, perhaps carried along ancient trade routes or migratory paths, could travel incredible distances. Or it reveals a deeper truth about the human mind, that when faced with the great mysteries of life and loss, different peoples in different lands can sometimes shape the same answer from the heart of a mountain. These Indian jars are not duplicates, they are variations on a theme, each one adapted to its own local stone, its own community's hands, its own specific spiritual needs. They whisper of a broader ritual landscape that we are only beginning to perceive, a fragmented mosaic of belief where each stone jar is a piece waiting to be placed. Finding the pattern between them, tracing the invisible lines that may or may not connect Laos to India, is one of archaeology's great silent pursuits. It asks us to listen not just to a single site, but to the chorus of stones across a continent, a chorus that suggests our ancestors' inner lives, their fears and their reverence, may have resonated across much wider horizons than we ever knew. A hill is a story waiting to be read, and in the town of Visoko, Bosnia, a new and controversial story began to be written in 2005. An amateur researcher announced that a series of symmetrical hills dominating the valley were not hills at all. He proposed they were the largest and oldest pyramids on Earth, constructed by a lost civilization over 12,000 years ago. The central formation, Visochika Hill, was rechristened the Pyramid of the Sun, with its angular sides, flat top, and cardinal orientation seeming to defy natural chance. For many, this was a revelation of epic scale, a hidden chapter of human history literally reshaping the landscape. Satellite imagery appeared to show geometric patterns, and reports of underground tunnels and mysterious stone slabs fueled a media sensation. Here was a mystery not dug from the earth, but seen in the very shape of the earth itself, a call to rewrite everything we thought we knew about Europe's ancient past. The response from the global scientific community, however, was swift and nearly unanimous. Teams of geologists, archaeologists, and geomorphologists examined the site. Their conclusion was definitive. The hills are natural formations, a product of millions of years of sedimentary deposition and tectonic uplift. The flat tops are erosion-resistant layers of conglomerate stone, not constructed platforms. The angular sides are the result of prehistoric landslides and quarrying activity from medieval and Roman times, when the hills were mined for quality stone. The so-called tunnels were likely natural fissures or medieval mine shafts, later modified. The geometric patterns seen from above were interpreted as the result of agricultural terracing, forestry, and selective perception, where the human mind finds familiar shapes in complex natural contours. This clash creates a modern archaeological drama unlike any other. On one side, a passionate movement sees a revolutionary truth dismissed by a rigid establishment. They point to perceived alignments, unusual energy readings, and the sheer intuitive power of the pyramid shape as proof that mainstream science is unwilling to accept a paradigm-shattering discovery. On the other side, professional researchers see a case of pareidolia on a monumental scale, where the desire to find a pattern has overridden methodological rigor. They emphasize that extraordinary claims require extraordinary, verifiable evidence that must withstand peer review and align with the broader, interconnected web of geological and archaeological knowledge. The Bosnian pyramids controversy, therefore, is less about ancient builders and more about how we interpret the world today. It highlights the profound human need to find meaning and grandeur in nature, to populate our landscapes with the fingerprints of intelligent designers. It is a mystery born from a powerful narrative, one that asks us where the line lies between open-minded exploration and disciplined skepticism. The hills of Visoko stand quietly, as they have for eons, their true story written in layers of sandstone and clay. Yet the story we choose to see in them speaks volumes about our own time, our hunger for lost origins, and the eternal, compelling tension between the wonder we wish for and the evidence we can truly hold. Granite can hold a message for 10,000 years, but who decides what that message should say? In 1980, in a quiet field in Elbert County, Georgia, a set of massive granite slabs was erected under a veil of calculated anonymity. They were called the Georgia Guidestones. Nearly 20 feet tall, the monument was engraved with 10 principles for humanity, written in 8 of the world's modern languages. The guidelines spoke of maintaining humanity under 500 million people, of guiding reproduction wisely, of balancing personal rights with social duties, and of seeking harmony with nature. The words were not ancient, but their delivery felt timeless, a modern attempt to inscribe wisdom into the landscape for a future age. The true mystery, however, was not in the text but in the blank space where a name should have been. The project was commissioned by a man using the pseudonym R.C. Christian, claiming to represent a small group of Americans who wished to leave a message for posterity. The stonecutters and bankers involved were bound by non-disclosure agreements. This intentional, modern-day secrecy created an aura of profound enigma around a structure that was only decades old. It became a contemporary out-of-place artifact, not in time but in intent, a piece of deliberate mystery planted in the 20th century for the people of a distant future to ponder. Then, in 2022, the mystery took a sudden, violent turn. The monument was severely damaged in an explosion, and later, the remaining structure was dismantled for safety. In a flash, the Guidestones transformed from a living, debated monument into a literal relic, a fragment of the late 20th century with its own abrupt and puzzling end date. This arc, from mysterious creation to dramatic fragmentation, completes its journey into the realm of archaeological curiosity. The stones now serve as a powerful meta-commentary on our entire exploration. They remind us that the puzzles we leave behind are not always accidental. Sometimes they are carefully crafted, a conscious attempt to speak across the centuries. The sponsors of the Guidestones were, in a sense, playing the role of ancient architects, knowing that secrecy and scale would breed legend. They created a modern-day monolith designed to be found, to be read, and to be wondered about long after their own identities had turned to dust. This forces a profound shift in perspective. We spend so much time looking back, trying to decipher the intent of those who came before us. The Georgia Guidestones ask us to look forward, to consider our own legacy. What messages are we embedding in our world, intentionally or not, that will become the cryptic artifacts of tomorrow? What structures, what digital fragments, what buried capsules of our culture will future generations unearth and struggle to understand, attributing to us motives and mysteries we never intended? The stones are gone, but the question they pose is more permanent than granite. They challenge us to see that every era creates its own anomalies, and that the true timeline is not just a record of what was, but a continuous conversation between the past, the present, and the future we are actively, and often mysteriously, building right now. On a remote island in the vast Pacific, the last trees were falling. As the great stone moe gazed inland, a different legacy was being carved into the wood of the fallen Toromero trees. This is Rongo Rongo, a script of graceful, fluid symbols, each one a bird, a fish, a plant, or a celestial body, chiseled into wooden tablets in a method called reverse boustrafedon. The carver would begin at the bottom left, reading a line from left to right, then physically turn the tablet 180 degrees to read the next line, creating a text that zigzags like a plowed field. It is the only indigenous writing system known to have been invented anywhere in Polynesia, a stunning intellectual achievement born in profound isolation over 2,000 miles from the nearest continent. The symbols themselves are beautiful and orderly, arranged in clean lines that suggest a systematic recording of information, not random decoration. This appearance of a true writing system, emerging independently on the world's most secluded inhabited island, would be a historical marvel on par with the invention of script in Mesopotamia or China. Yet the moment of its discovery was also the moment of its near-total erasure. In the 1860s, after European contact brought devastating changes to the island, Peruvian slave raiders carried off or killed most of the Rapa Nui people who could read the script. Later, Christian missionaries, seeing the tablets as pagan idols, convinced the remaining islanders to burn them. Only a handful of tablets and a few other inscribed objects survived, saved by chance or hidden away. Today, just 26 artifacts bearing Rongorongo are known to exist, scattered in museums across the globe. They are fragments of a shattered library. The central, heartbreaking question is not just what the script says, but what it fundamentally is. Is Rongorongo a full writing system, capable of recording the full complexity of the Rapa Nui language? Or is it proto-writing, a set of symbols used as a memory aid for priests to recite sacred chants, genealogies, or astronomical cycles? Some researchers see patterns that suggest calendrical notations, tracking the movements of the moon and stars that were so vital to Polynesian voyagers. Others believe the tablets may hold creation myths, histories of great chiefs, or even records related to the Birdman cult. Without a Rosetta Stone, a bilingual text that can bridge Rongorongo to a known language, every attempt at decipherment is like trying to hear a song by only studying the shape of the instrument. The tragedy is amplified by the context of its loss. The Rapa Nui people are renowned for their monumental stonework, for the moai that stand as eternal guardians. But Rongorongo represents a different kind of monument, one of intellect and inward thought. It was their voice, not carved in unmovable stone for the landscape, but inscribed on portable wood for the mind. Its silencing is a double loss. We lost the specific knowledge it contained, and we lost the chance to understand the full cognitive world of a people we have only ever seen from the outside, through the silent, stoic faces of their statues. The undeciphered script is a locked door to an entire room of human experience. It is an artifact that is tragically out of time, not with our timeline, but with its own chance for preservation. It arrived at the moment of global connection only to be consumed by it. The few remaining tablets now sit in climate-controlled cases, their wood stabilized, their symbols meticulously photographed. We preserve the physical object with a care that came centuries too late to preserve its meaning. Rongorongo stands as a quiet, profound reminder that history is not just about what was built, but about what was thought, and that the most fragile treasures are often not made of stone, but of ideas given form, waiting in vain for a future that learned how to save the container, but had already forgotten the song it was meant to hold. The silent, self-writing messages of Rongorongo represent a lost human voice, but some of the most compelling stories are written not by people, but by the earth itself, in a language of motion and mud. In the heart of Death Valley, on a flat, dry lakebed called the Racetrack Playa, stones keep a strange diary. Scattered across this vast, cracked mud plain are hundreds of rocks, some weighing as much as a person. Behind them, they drag long, meandering trails, grooves pressed deep into the baked clay. These trails curve, zigzag, and cross one another, as if the stones had gone for a leisurely, solitary stroll. For over a century, this was one of geology's most charming and persistent puzzles. How were these sailing stones moving? With no witnesses, no animal tracks nearby, and no human footprints, the phenomenon seemed to defy logic. The rocks were clearly traveling, sometimes over 1,000 feet, but the force that pushed them was utterly invisible. The theories were as creative as the trails themselves. Some suggested powerful, localized dust devils or hurricane-force winds, yet the stones were too heavy for the area's typical breezes to budge. Others whispered of magnetic anomalies or even supernatural forces, a playground for ghosts in one of the hottest places on Earth. The mystery thrived on its perfect isolation and the complete lack of a witness. It was a crime scene with no perpetrator, a dance with no dancer. Then, in 2014, a team of researchers equipped with time-lapse cameras, weather stations, and a great deal of patience finally caught the culprit in the act. They discovered that the movement requires a perfect and rare cocktail of conditions. First, the playa must fill with just enough rainwater to form a shallow, temporary pond. Then, on a cold winter night, that water must freeze into a thin, windowpane-like sheet of ice. As the sun rises and the temperature climbs, this ice sheet begins to break up into large, floating panels. Now, a gentle breeze, one far too weak to move a rock on dry ground, pushes against these expansive ice sheets. The ice, now acting like a giant, brittle sail, nudges the rocks trapped within or resting atop it. With the underlying mud softened by water into a slick, slippery clay, the stones inch forward, carving their graceful, enduring signatures into the earth below. The movement is achingly slow, just a few inches per minute, and lasts only as long as the ice persists. By midday, the ice melts, the water evaporates, and the stone settles into its new position, its journey complete, leaving behind a trail that will bake hard in the sun for years to come. The solved mystery of the sailing stones is a crucial parable for our entire journey. It stands as a beautiful testament to the power of the scientific process, not to diminish wonder, but to deepen it. For decades, the unexplained trails sparked imagination and awe. The solution did not erase that awe, it transformed it. We no longer wonder if a ghostly force is at work. We now understand how the elegant, precise collaboration of water, ice, wind, and mud choreographs a silent ballet. This phenomenon reminds us that many of the world's greatest puzzles are not evidence of forgotten technologies or lost civilizations, but of the breathtaking complexity and subtlety of natural systems. The sailing stones teach a vital lesson in humility and observation. They show that answers often come not from grand speculation, but from patient watching, from being present in the right place at the right time with an open mind and a camera ready. They prove that even the most seemingly magical movements on our planet have a logic, a rhythm, and a reason, waiting for the curious and the persistent to finally listen to the quiet story written in the mud. Our journey across continents and centuries leaves us not with a single rewritten timeline, but with a transformed perspective. The true value of these 35 puzzles is not a new history book, but a new way of reading the old one. We have seen artifacts that shine as beacons of lost genius, like the intricate bronze cosmos of the Antikythera mechanism, reminding us that human ingenuity has soared to dazzling heights, only to sometimes vanish into the silent depths. We have encountered cautionary tales like the glittering crystal skulls, which teach us how our own desires can weave compelling myths, and how the market for mystery can sometimes craft its own evidence. And we have stood before nature's own masterpieces, from the self-writing stones of Death Valley to the sonar silhouette in the Baltic, where the patient forces of geology and physics create illusions so perfect they challenge our very perception of design. These finds, in their totality, do not demand that we tear down the library of human history. Instead, they invite us to walk its aisles with a more curious, more humble, and more discerning eye. They stretch the boundaries of what we think is possible, forcing us to ask sharper questions. They champion a healthy skepticism that questions both the conventional story and the extraordinary claim, seeking evidence over echo. Most importantly, they restore a vital sense of awe. Whether the answer lies in a forgotten craftsman's tool, a slow geological process, or a genuine enigma that still defies explanation, each discovery re-enchants the past, revealing it as a living conversation, not a closed case. So what secrets remain? What other whispers are waiting in the dust, submerged in silt, or hidden in plain sight on a sun-baked plain? The map is never complete. Every answered question reveals new horizons, and every solved mystery often births two more. This is the perpetual engine of curiosity, the drive that has always pushed us to look deeper, dig further, and wonder more. Our story is still being written, one fragment, one question, one discovery at a time. The search, as it always has been, continues. If this exploration into the edges of history resonated with you, consider subscribing for more journeys into the unknown. We would love to hear from you. Which of these mysteries compels you the most, or what other enigmatic finds capture your imagination? Share your thoughts in the comments below.